Hey there, so today I actually decided to take a look at the Minisforum EM680. I actually ended up picking this up off of Amazon recently for around $425. Now, I got the 32GB version and it comes with a 1TB SSD. And at the heart of this is the Ryzen 7 6800U. I've only heard a little bit about this system. I've never actually looked at any content related to it. And after testing it out and being kind of confused by the numbers, as well as going around and looking at other content about this, I can confidently say that you people have been lied to. And I get that's a very bold thing to say and it sounds very aggressive, but you have to understand that the numbers that I was getting out of the box really bring into question a lot of the channels out there that kind of covered this system before. Now, this isn't meant to be a call out video or anything like that. I'm not going to name any channels specifically because I feel like just mentioning any channel directly is going to dilute the point that I'm trying to make. This isn't to attack anybody specifically or anything like that, but it does show that there is a lot of misleading content out there. I just want to show you guys the numbers that I got out of the box and kind of just explain a little bit of the situation with this mini PC. Now, first and foremost, the 6800U that is in this system has a typical TDP range that can go anywhere between 15 to 25 watts, just depending on what the manufacturer wants to set it to. But they can obviously go past that if they want to, or even lower than that if they want to. The general guidance from AMD is 15 to 25 watts, but in general, OEMs can pretty much set it to whatever it is that they want. In this case, there was a very interesting scenario where when I first looked at the BIOS, it was telling me that it had a TDP pretty much set by default to 30 watts. And it does hit 30 watts when you load the CPU. As soon as you're doing a workload that is doing both CPU and GPU, say playing a game, suddenly the system is limited to only 15 watts. This is going to dramatically affect the performance of this system. Now, again, you have to understand that what's happening here is not something that is a secret. Minisforum have pretty much made a response to the community that has been complaining about this, and their explanation is pretty much as follows. Essentially, what they say is that this system is really meant to be an office computer. They designed it around a maximum power supply of just 65 watts. Now, what Minisforum claims is essentially that the 6000 series from AMD has a problem of running at a lower TDP where it seems to exhibit issues where it seems to lock the TDP at 15 watts if you're doing a mixed workload where the CPU and GPU are both running. If it's just the CPU, everything runs fine. They designed the entire system around the idea of just a 65-watt power adapter, and it was just meant to be an office computer. But they realized that their customers were upset about the level of performance that they were getting out of this, so they released a BIOS that you can update it to that will actually increase the TDP that you can use the system at, but you cannot use the power adapter that it came with. The power adapter is only 65 watts. What you need now is a 100-watt power adapter, which you are going to have to buy yourself. Now, this is Minisforum's own claims here. This is their official statement pretty much saying that this is a problem with the 6000 series and that the system itself was designed just to run at this lower TDP, and it's just the CPU itself at this lower TDP that can't really handle this properly. To me, this seems like kind of a cop-out where they're trying to shift the blame over to AMD. There are plenty of other systems out there with the 6800U that perform better than this at this TDP. So there seems to actually be a issue here with Minisforum's implementation of this system itself. Now, it's not completely useless. I'm not trying to sit here and tell you that this is an awful product by any means, and it definitely has some benefits to it. But the thing that annoyed me is that a lot of the videos that I was looking at trying to just compare numbers here were confusing to me because there were plenty of people that were running it just at the stock 15-watt TDP in gaming workloads. But there were other people that were showing higher TDP numbers and things like that. Now, if you use something like the AMD APU tuning utility, you can actually raise the TDP, but it seems to be very inconsistent in the performance that it's giving you because of the fact that this is actually a hardware limitation the power supply that the system comes with is not actually strong enough to give you all of that extra wattage. So by doing this, you are actually risking damaging your power supply or just causing instability in your system that might lead to the system shutting down. This is a problem if you don't disclose this information to your audience. And that seems to be the case that I saw with quite a few channels. They will raise the TDP, but they won't mention the fact that this inherently comes with issues, and the performance gains are very limited because, again, you are limited by the power supply. You need to update to this most recent BIOS that quote unquote fixes the problem, but at that point you will not be able to use the stock power adapter. You will have to buy your own that is at least 100 watts. No one seems to tell anybody about this. This I only ended up finding out after having to do research because the numbers that I was getting just were not making any sense for what on paper should be a better performing system. Of course, that 15 watt TDP limit is going to be extremely brutal, but I have to stress to you guys that this is a limit that only affects gaming workloads and any workload that is going to use both the CPU and GPU in a meaningful way. Workloads where you're only using up the CPU, like say running Cinebench, are actually going to utilize 30 watts perfectly fine. And actually, while running Cinebench R23 measured from the wall, the system was pulling about 46 to 50 watts, 50 watts being about the maximum that it actually ended up reaching. And 45 watts is around where it really stabilized. But while gaming, and I did the gaming on Doom 2016, the measure from the wall at that point was 32 watts. But while we're on the topic of Cinebench, let's actually look at the performance numbers that we were getting on there. Now again, this is at the stock setting, which the stock out of the box TDP in the BIOS is set to 30. Just keep in mind that while gaming, it will drop down to 15. But in the CPU only workload, we do hit that 30 watt TDP. And as such, the level of performance that we actually end up getting in terms of multi-core performance is 10,805. This puts it about 1,000 points behind the Ryzen 7 5800H at a TDP of 54 watts. Now do keep in mind that the IPC difference between the 5000 series and 6000 series is actually very negligible. They're essentially the exact same architecture. It was just a slight increase in efficiency due to the fact that it switched to a newer half node. It didn't do a full node jump. It was essentially just a refined node from TSMC. So you see slight improvements, but it's usually in the single digit range. Now what those efficiency gains essentially mean is that at a lower TDP, we are almost getting all the way to the performance of the 5800H while using pretty noticeably less power. And when we actually look at the single core performance, the 5800H actually starts to fall behind the 6800U, which you would expect due to the fact that the 6000 series is going to have slightly better IPC and it'll clock slightly better at the same wattage. And since we're just loading up one core here, it's really actually able to flex its muscles here. Though it still falls behind its higher TDP 6000 series brethren with the 7735HS beating it out. And keep in mind that the 7735HS is just a refreshed version of the 6800H. So it's effectively the same CPU architecture as this and pretty much the same iGPU, just all in a lower TDP system. And at 30 watts, the level of performance that we're getting here is actually pretty decent, but now we're gonna jump into the big problem, and that is the gaming performance. Now, one of the first games that I actually ended up testing on the system, and the one that first made me concerned, is Counter-Strike 2. Here we have it running with the lowest in-game graphics settings, and we have FSR set to the performance preset, if you can't tell by the fact that the edges of everything are just shimmering. And the level of performance that we're getting here is pretty abysmal for what is a title that, while it's definitely more demanding than CSGO was, it's not so different that you would expect this level of performance. I mean, we've seen this title on other RDNA 2 based iGPUs, and we've seen it on RDNA 3, and we've even seen it in Vega. And this level of performance is extremely disappointing to see and very concerning. I want to point out, take a look at the power usage here. We are using only 10 watts. Now, this game was an anomaly. It was an anomaly because of the fact that the power usage that it was showing was ridiculously low in comparison to other titles. While others were around 15 to 17 watts, this was consistently staying at about 10 with the occasional spike up to 11. And this was after multiple restarts, after trying to adjust settings in the BIOS. This was pretty much just how CSGO was, or rather CS2 was running on this system. And it definitely had me concerned for what the rest of the testing was going to be like. So after the abysmal showing from Counter-Strike 2, I decided to actually jump into Doom 2016, since in general it tends to be a pretty solid performer with these low-end mini PCs. And by low-end, I just mean that they have iGPUs. And while we were hitting a 60 FPS average, those 1% lows weren't looking great. And specifically, what I want you to pay attention to is those frame time charts there. There is a huge gap between the 1% lows and the FPS average, which means that this does not feel very smooth and consistent. It's certainly not the worst gaming experience in the world, but if you were only looking at the average, you were definitely going to expect better performance than this, especially considering that this is a RDNA 2 based iGPU that actually has 12 cores. But again, 15 watts is about what we're getting most of the time playing through the game. And 15 watts having to be shared between an 8-core CPU and a 12-core GPU, where the maximum GPU clock speed is 2.2 gigahertz. This is pretty much a recipe for disaster. And you can pretty much tell by the fact that if you look at the GPU clock, we're not really even getting close to that 2.2 gigahertz. A lot of the times we're barely above 1 gigahertz. And if you also look at the GPU utilization, it seems to fluctuate a lot. Sometimes we'll be at 100% load, but then you'll see a drop down to 50, sometimes even going down into the 40s, and occasionally you might even see it go down all the way to 0. Now, this doesn't make any sense because when it hits 0, it doesn't introduce any micro stutter or anything like that, at least nothing that is perceivable, though in general the game doesn't exactly feel perfect. So I can't tell if this is just a reading error here or if there is just really a lot of instability happening right now due to that lower TDP, or just the way that Minisforum configured this system. Because again, you can find systems out there that have this chip configured at 15 watts and it still tends to perform more consistent than this. Though again, 15 watts is still just very limiting for a chip like this. Now, another game that I jumped into to take a look at was actually Tiny Tina's Wonderland. Here we have it running with the low in-game graphics settings. It isn't the lowest it'll go down to, but it is the low preset. There is a very low beneath this. And we are using FSR at the performance preset. And again, the frame times seem to be one of the biggest problems that we see, where there are these consistent spikes throughout all of it. And again, the GPU clock is just not reaching the numbers that it's supposed to, sometimes going down to some ridiculously low numbers, as well as our GPU utilization is just fluctuating all over the place. 15 watts is just way too limiting for a chip that is this dense. There are so many cores on both the GPU and the CPU that are all fighting for power right now. The CPU less so in gaming scenarios, though still, if you look at the percentage of utilization, it does sometimes spike up even above 50%, which means that more than half the cores are getting utilized. So that's 4 to 6 cores being utilized on the CPU, as well as 12 GPU cores fighting for power right now. Now, I tested about 12.5 games, but this is going to be the last one that I show you because I really just am trying to make a different point here. And I just wanted to show you another title that we have seen perform really, really well on a lot of different systems. Rainbow Six Siege is still one of the most popular games in the world, but it performs really, really well on practically any kind of device. Here we definitely get some great numbers, but it's a lot closer to a Vega iGPU with some actual juice in it than it is to RDNA 2's performance on here. So that TDP is still being a limiting factor because again, the GPU clock speeds are just all over the place. And though the frame times are significantly better than the other titles that we've looked at, there's still that inconsistency that's happening where you will see sudden jumps to almost double the millisecond latency. Now, I realize that this video isn't a great review of the product itself because I've only showed you a few games and I've mostly complained about misleading numbers here, but that's just because of the fact that I was genuinely shocked by just how bad the numbers were. I mean, the Counter-Strike 2 numbers were shockingly bad. Now, I understand that there is that BIOS that will raise the TDP and actually let us squeeze out some more performance out of this. And I do plan on installing that at some point. I've already ordered the 100-watt USB-C charger that is needed to actually use it. And I will be doing some comparison numbers between the stock BIOS that you get when you buy the system and then the unlocked BIOS. But I want to emphasize that this is the level of performance that you get out of this system out of the box if you buy it right now. If you did not think to look for what was causing these issues, if you just kind of accepted the performance that you were getting, you wouldn't even realize that you're kind of getting screwed here. And the thing that annoys me is that you might have thought of buying the system because you watched someone else's video and they told you it's really great at gaming and it does all of these amazing things. And it is great at a lot of things. I wanted to do a normal review for it. I wanted to talk about it like normally, like how I would with a bunch of other systems, but the numbers that I was getting were just so inconsistent due to the fact that CPU workloads would be perfectly fine and then anything with the GPU would fall apart. And it just made me go down a deep dive of just looking at a bunch of videos and just seeing how people talked about the system, and it really was eye-opening to me and very disappointing to see. And look, I'm not going to sit here and act like I am the greatest YouTuber ever. At the end of the day, what my job as a reviewer is to just give you my opinion mixed in with objective numbers that I get. My CSGO numbers should be the same as any other person that buys this system and uses it. I can't lie about that unless I am manipulating the hardware to do things that it can't do out of the box. And raising the TDP of the system is not something you can do out of the box. You can't do it in the BIOS. What you have to do is download third-party software, and essentially force more TDP into a system that hardware-wise is actually not designed to support it, at least not without a BIOS update. So it has been very annoying to see. And I just don't want people to be misled because, I mean, I get it. Everyone's trying to make money off of affiliate links. The internet runs off of affiliate links. I use affiliate links, but I don't need every product that I cover to somehow be the greatest thing in the world. If something is not performing up to spec, I'm going to tell you because I don't want you buying this thing, being disappointed, and then returning it. That did nothing for me except ruin my reputation to you in your eyes. Well, if I just tell you, hey, this product isn't really all that great, I think that this or this is better, and you go with those instead and you're happy, well, guess what? I did my job. That's just my job as a reviewer. It is to essentially tell you the objective truth in terms of numbers and then my opinion on what you should do with that information. And that's why covering this system has been a lot more difficult than I thought it would be because of the fact that there is a fix to the problem. It just requires you to go buy your own power adapter, which is not earth-shattering by any means, but that did end up costing me $30. So that's another $30 cost on top of this system, and I have to flash the BIOS to actually unlock that extra feature. And this already is a huge ask for practically anybody out there to do if all they wanted to do was just to pick up a system that someone told them was really powerful at a lot of tasks. And again, it is really powerful, but it just has these issues that really make it hard to recommend. Now, I'm going to be doing a full video on it where I'm going to test it out on a bunch of different games, and there's going to be comparisons with the Sur 6 Max, the Sur 5 Max, as well as the Sur 5 Pro and just the regular Sur 5. That will be the main video that I do on this thing. I wanted to talk to you guys about this right now just because of the fact that it kind of upset me just to see how people will mislead others just so that they could profit when you could just as easily make money by being honest with people. I don't know. This past year has just been extremely life-changing in terms of how well the channel has been doing and how it has almost become a viable career option now. And it's crazy to me to think that there are people out there that are even more successful at this and have far larger, more dedicated audiences, and they choose to take advantage advantage of that for a profit that they essentially could have just made by not lying to people and just recommending good products. It's just disappointing to see that people out there would care more about making money than it would just to offer people actual solutions to the problems that they have, where they want a specific workload. They just want to know what is a good system that is targeted towards that workload that they want. You can just be honest. You could just be honest and point them towards actually good products, and you'll still make money off of that. And I thank all of you guys that, you know, use the affiliate links, that have bought products and let me know that you actually enjoy them, because it makes me feel like I'm actually doing something helpful. And I hope that I could keep doing right by you guys. I hope that as I continue to make more videos covering different products, that you can get a sense of at least honesty from me, that I'm not trying to lie to you and make a product seem like it is the greatest thing in the world. I think that a lot of products do have merit, just like I think that this system does have some merit. It just sucks when the issues that it does have get muddied by a bunch of people that, you know, want to profit off of this. So stay tuned for the full video that I'm going to do on this system. I know this video has already been very long-winded, but it is very much a first impressions, and a lot of it has just been me kind of doing research and being blown away by what I've seen. So again, stay subscribed or get subscribed if you want to see all of those different comparisons. I've gotten quite a few different mini PCs in the last few weeks that I kind of have just been benchmarking while also doing holiday stuff. So there's going to be a huge amount of comparisons happening in the next few days, but also stay tuned for the Sir 7 review. So I'll see you guys.